to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. I am coming to you via Zoom from my home. The modern day women have rights and freedoms that were obtained by past struggle and activism. However, today the struggle for equality continues. Today, we are going to highlight and discuss the importance of gender equality and the continued challenges. Joining me today for this discussion are Dr. Ellin Scholnick. She's a professor emerita and faculty omnibus officer, chair, president of the President's Commission on Women's Issues with the University of Maryland in College Park. We have Valerie Ervin, past county council member for Montgomery County and contributor. And we have Professor Ruth Zambrana. She's the interim chair of the newly named Harriet Tubman Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. This is quite an august group. Thank you for joining me, ladies. I'm so excited to have you and to talk about what do we need to do next. Professor Zambrana, before we started the show, we had a really interesting conversation about what do we need to do next.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I just want to make one correction. I am the former interim chair. I just completed that service on December 31st. I think there are a number of things. There are still a lot of issues that all women confront, but that different racial and ethnic and women of different classes confront differently. So we have to begin to, I think, as a colleague says, unlink the ampersand of women and minorities. I think that what we want to do next is probably look at these differences, look at what are the needs, focus on equity, which is the opportunity to respond to unique needs with unique interventions.
You know, one of the things I thought really interesting about the commentary that the comments we were exchanging earlier was how the women's movement, or when we talk about gender and equality and gender, we generalize. And I am as guilty, maybe more so than most, that I generalize and I don't take into consideration the difference between a white woman with a Black and brown woman with, you know, different ethnicities and their experience compared, you know, or trying to be boiled down to a generality. What from your experience have you seen in this arena?
I think, again, not generalizing is really important, regardless of status. In other words, among professional women, which I have studied faculty, African-American faculty, Mexican-American, Puerto Rican. These faculty, historically underrepresented faculty, for example, not only confront the burden of gender, but of race, of ethnicity, and of class. So that their needs within, for example, the academy are very different and equally important, you know, the burden of access to wealth and family help throughout difficult times, etc. So that's one thing that's really important. For low-income women, you know, there are basic equity issues there, but still, oftentimes, we aggregate everyone into this category without really looking at what they need. So I think the next step is to look at these differences with African-American women, Latina women. Geographic space, we know, really matters. In the South, if you need help, you're less likely to get help if you are African-American or farm workers, Mexican farm workers, or even low-income white women. So I think that's big. I think we also have to look at policies that can benefit all women. For example, universal childcare. So we need some efforts here, some policy efforts that will help all women. And some women may need a little bit more. And some
Well,
women
let me interrupt you there and ask Dr. Scholnick, because we talked about careers and the impact that modern women are facing with the unprecedented times of the pandemic and the difficult choices they have to make.
Yes, I think that that part is true. Uh, Let me put this in a somewhat broader and therefore more general perspective, Ruth, though I think that obviously who you are makes a great deal of difference. I think that what we need to do is to realize that the issues are really related to the structure of institutions. And I will focus for the moment on faculty, academic careers, maybe because I know it so well. But even our disciplines, what it is we study and what we value has been determined by a masculine point of view. So that, for example, when we take a look at what kind of work we do, uh, things that women have been interested in, for example, working outside in communities or giving service and advice to students within the university are less valued. So the roles that we're assigned are very often roles that make it very difficult to progress. And in fact, you see that because the most prestigious ranks in the university are populated by men. So the higher up you go, the fewer women there are. And you have to ask, why is this the case? And in part, it's because we structure academic life so that it's hard to do work-life balance. We value particular kinds of research, and we even value particular theories that tend to be more masculine focused than a broader perspective.
Well, and Valerie, that's you have the perspective of being a working woman, and a prior. You were part of the Montgomery County Council, so you know what it's like to try to draft laws and regulations for, dealing with varied issues, not just with regard to gender and women. What is your experience in this perspective?
First of all, let me just say happy Women's History Month. We're a few days away, and it's really exciting for me to be on this call with all of the women that you have put together to talk about these issues. First of all, let me just say I am not from academia, but I've spent some time in academia, so I know what you're saying is true. But what I want to speak to more specifically is you mentioned my time on the council. As a Black woman in Montgomery County, I've had to break many barriers over like 30 years. So it's not, so when the younger millennial women see us, they think that where they are is just the way it's supposed to be without recognizing the struggle for many, many, many years that women, all women, no matter what they look like, no matter what their background, have had to face to get where we are today. And like I like to say, we're making sure the elevator goes down and picks up the younger women and brings them back up to the top. But I wanted to speak about a couple of things. And one is you brought it up about the pandemic and what the pandemic has done for all of us. It's opened our eyes to the fact that what we're witnessing is nothing new. For example, the woman who was written about in all the major newspapers this past week, who was arrested because she went to work and left her 2 young children in a motel room to fend for themselves. Surprise, surprise, people, that is not new. That has been going on forever, which is one of the reasons I became a union organizer many years ago, sort of in the footsteps of my grandmother and my mother, who always worked outside the home. They cleaned other people's houses, they cooked for other people, they worked in nursing homes and hospitals on the lowest end of the economic realm. So I grew up with these amazingly strong and competent Black women who sort of paved the way for me to say, what I saw was not out of the ordinary. What I saw was what I thought most women in America faced. And so what we're seeing is this sort of merging of experiences now. And we saw that in the election that just happened. We elected the first woman of color to be the vice president. How did that happen? Lots of women made sure that that happened. So there's so much to talk about. I don't want to just like pigeon myself in the hole of, you know, being a former elected, because where I am, where I sit now, is to make sure that I do all that I can to assist younger women, particularly women of color and immigrant women, to see that the road ahead is pretty wide open for them in ways that it might not have been for me and my colleagues when we first started out.
Well, one of the things that I thought about the importance of this pandemic, other than the public health issue, is that it really brought to light and to the attention of the public, the community, all of us, that there are many things that we have worked on, but there's been kind of that sense of, well, we've done enough, or we got there, we're perfect. And we're nowhere near. With the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter, we see that there's a lot of work to be done. We saw it in the Me Too movement, how women were treated in the entertainment industry. And I'm sure in many other industries, we're facing those issues. So, you know, to circle back to, you know, what's next, Dr. Zambrana? What are we supposed to do next?
Well, I like what, I can't see your full name, what Valerie is talking about. But I just want to go back once, because I think when we talk about structure, we need to talk about structural racism. And it is really structural racism that has kept us, predominantly, because we have to look at the data, and I know we don't want to hear about data, but the point is data. We can't deny it. When we look at the academy, only 5% men and women are part of the academy, which is 4,000 universities in the United States. We can't avoid this anymore. So I think, you know, again, we cannot generalize. As soon as we generalize, we go to white, because we do have significant women in positions. We see it now in the Biden administration, but we also see it in the university. The change has been tremendous in 20 years, and it's predominantly white. So, and that's good. That's good, because we need allies now. We need white women to understand differences among women and different needs, and to develop those working together that Valerie is talking about. We need to work together to look at a living wage. We need to make, I mean, Black women and Latina women make much less than Asian and white women. We need to have a living wage for everybody, including the men, because 2 incomes is better than 1.
Well, I agree with you on that one.
We need universal childcare.
Right.
We need universal health. I mean, women are the caretakers of their families, and they need to have the opportunity to have supports to go to work and to take care of their health.
Dr. Scholnick, you had mentioned structural issues with regard to women. What does that mean when we hear structural issues?
Yeah, structural issues allowing women to have a voice. So the structural issues are that you have one set of people defining what success in a career is. And what we need to do is to have changes in that perspective, so that we have a broadening of whatever scholarship, for example, of choosing what are the important issues to focus on. So that's part of it. That is to have environments that enable you to have work-life balance, and that enable flexibility in the life course. So those are issues that are there. And then to return to what Dr. Zambrana says, we need also not just women to be fighting for other women, but to serve as role models, because part of advancing in a career is networking And we need to have women penetrate those networks and bring others in.
That's a really good point. Valerie, what do you think in 2021 would be, I know Dr. Zambrana had mentioned a few, but what do you think are legislative, now that we have a Democratic House and Senate and President, what do you think are top legislative issues that we could bring about that would have the most impact for women?
Well, in the short term, it's passing COVID relief. Hopefully, it appears that Biden doesn't need the Republicans to pass the COVID relief bill, which will enable a lot of families to stay in their homes and not be evicted, number one. Number two is raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. I was on the council when we raised the minimum wage. I was one of the original sponsors of that legislation here in not only in my own county, but I was executive director at the Working Families Party, where we advocated very strongly over a decade to get the minimum wage lifted. Now we know why that's so important, because so many single women are heads of households and are the only breadwinners in the household. And so, as a real policy wonk that I know I am, one of the important things that I think needs to follow that is, here close to home, people are also seeing issues of food insecurity, which have always been there, but now the issue has been elevated. And we need to put into some sort of legislative format a way that nobody should go hungry in our communities. It should be legislated that people receive food at the very minimum. And finally, something that I really liked hearing about during the last fall's presidential campaign was a guaranteed income, which is a very fascinating concept that is really catching on, not only here in the US, but around the world, that as automation and takes over many entry-level jobs and low-wage jobs, like supermarkets I used to represent in my union, supermarket workers, you're seeing more and more often, there's robots, there's automation, and all of that is replacing human beings' ability to work for a living and provide for families. So there is a whole gamut of policy that mostly women, this is why it's important to elect women to office, because men, for the most part, aren't the ones taking care of children and the home and the family. And so all of this sort of dovetails to this issue that we all started talking about, and that is, why is it important for women to be seen in all these different areas? And I want to end with this, and that is, there are gatekeepers. I know this in politics, and our two experts in academia can talk about how that's also the case in academia. And gatekeepers are normally men who have kept very, very skilled and talented women from pursuing political careers. And then there are the unspoken rules that go along with who gets in, who has access, and who doesn't.
Dr. Scholnick, based on what Valerie just said, what are the options? What are the things we women can do to encourage the younger generations of women to, grow and pursue these careers and positions that are not just, being caretakers and such? What is it that we have to do to really inspire and motivate them to pursue these positions, public office, those kinds of things?
Well, you've already mentioned some of them. That is, one of them is to be role models for them. So that is to use our advancement for others. And I think that mentoring, mentoring, advising, making apparent the issues that are available. So one of the metaphors we can use is we need to throw a flashlight on those issues and pay attention to them and shine the light for other people.
But what do we do with the fact that there are many women that are actually obstacles to other women? I have found many times that I actually get a little bit more encouragement from men than I do from my fellow sisters. So, what would you say to those ladies who struggle to be mentors or to encourage others?
But you have obstacles in all kinds of fields that you can the answer is to overcome and to figure out what the premises are that these people have and try to see if there are ways to counter or work around them.
Right. What do you think, Dr. Zambrana?
First, I think is to acknowledge that there are different people, men, women, or they, who can provide mentoring. So I think for a long time, we have relied on a myth that women, have solidarity. I think, again, acknowledging differences against race, ethnicity, class, et cetera, is important. And I do think that what we are beginning to see is that there are men who can mentor, who are committed to mentoring, and there are women who are committed to mentoring. And I just gave a mentoring conversation with our advanced professors who are women in the university who are committed to mentoring. But there are a lot of differences. And so when you mentor, you have to have some compassion and some understanding, going back to structural racism, to different needs.
Valerie, to go back to something you said a long time ago when we were talking, you said that you just sat down at the table and made yourself heard. I mean, how hard was that? And do you recommend that for others to do the same?
Yeah, I sat down at the table for sure with my long ago shy self. I'm over that. But I wanted to say and following up on both of what the other two women guests said about mentoring. I think to take that one step further and talk about how we do more deliberate things, like on purpose, in academia and in other fields where we just saw politically how last year and the year before, more women ran for office than at any time in our history. That was not accidental. That was on purpose. That was deliberate. And I think that in particular, the Democratic Party opened itself wide to accept all kinds of women, whether you were a retired woman, whether you were white, black,
Yes.
brown, or immigrant. They opened those gates wide and they provided women with all the supports that were necessary for them to run, win, and succeed. So I hope that people who are watching this really understand that we're now at this point in our history that we need to be deliberate. And even though I'm not in academia, one of the things that I notice is that there's so very few slots available to begin with, that, and then there's tenure at universities, let's not forget to talk about that it's almost, it's one of the most difficult things to do is to open up those doors there and make it all be all deliberate speed to get to a different result. So we're seeing that we have to do things on purpose. Stacey Abrams.
So how do we keep the momentum? Because sometimes, we start really good and strong and then it kind of peters out. How do we keep
it doesn't end when we elect people. I'm talking about politics again. It's just beginning when you get elected. And so the supports that brand new women elected officials need is after they sit down in their office and say, now what do I do? And so anyway, that's
Dr. Zambrana, what do you think about that?
I like what Valerie is saying, and Valerie, just because when we're in the academy, I mean, we study this, oftentimes we don't do it, but I think you said something critically important. Two things: women have to work across sectors, and I think we saw that happening, and we have to do more of that. So across sectors with the political women, with the elected women, I know that we work with Jocelyn.
Pena Melnick, yeah.
Yes, we work with Jocelyn. Oftentimes we need her or she needs us. So I think working across sectors, if we get into the corporate sector, political sector, philanthropic sector, academic sector, that would be really important. I think Valerie said another thing that I think is crucial, which is supporting women, young women, but we can't forget wise women and older women. It just, I mean, this notion that we could only do with young women, to me, is really very exclusionary and ridiculous, to tell you the truth. So I think it's different women in the middle who are just beginning to do their careers. So
Okay, well, I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to give Dr. Scholnick the last word because we have about a minute left. We're running out of time. I'm so sorry. But Dr. Scholnick, if you could take yourself off mute and give us your last words about what we were talking about.
The other issue is that women need to look at what they have done in the past and keep on nurturing it, because you think that just because you've made an accomplishment, that it's going to last, that it's not going to be under attack, that it isn't going to need to evolve. So the story keeps on going.
All right. Well, that is the perfect last words. It's ongoing. Keep at it. Let's keep the momentum. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank my guests and audience for joining me. You can view this show and others on YouTube. We're also on Facebook. I'm Mariana Cordier. Looking forward to seeing you next time.